Last night, the U.S. presidential debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton took place. And off the bat, my initial reaction, having watched it, is I'm honestly astounded that that wasn't full of more vitriol than it actually was. I expected way more in the amount of name-calling and personal attacks than there was. I was expecting this to be a lot worse than it actually was. I gotta say, on some level, I'm actually kind of impressed. But I've got a couple of observations that I've made about, the whole thing. The whole thing about ISIS, Donald Trump kept repeatedly saying that although Hillary Clinton has a plan to fight ISIS, in the end she could have done that this past 8 years. That's when she could have been doing it. And it's just, he totally doesn't get that ISIS is a creation of the United States that is used for foreign policy. There was never any real intent to get rid of ISIS, only to rein them in certain situations where it made them look bad. And we saw the emails where Hillary Clinton was selling weapons to them. And this, of course, is not limited to Hillary Clinton. This is not something you can criticize her for specifically. This would be something that you criticize U.S. imperialism for. It cannot be made specifically only to her. Now, Trump, in his whole presentation, he went in right exactly where he should. If something contradicted what he said, if the facts contradicted his statement, he just said, look it up. He just completely brushed it aside, said the facts said different, even though he was wrong. He continually invoked the image of Ronald Reagan and how Ronald Reagan did so great for the country, etc., particularly as it comes to job creation. When in fact the entire record says the opposite. Reagan was absolutely horrible. And then again, he goes on about trying to do things like Reagan did. It blamed a lot of the deregulation of the financial industry, forgetting that it was Reagan who actually kicked all that deregulation off. It's like he has no concept of history whatsoever. And I loved when the situation, the whole discussion got onto Iran, and how it was Clinton and Obama's leadership that prevented a nuclear Iran from doing any kind of damage and prevented that, when that whole thing was a complete lie. There never were any nuclear weapons in Iran. In fact, they never had a nuclear program. This is an often repeated lie. And then Trump comes in and he criticizes them for having made a deal, like unfreezing a bunch of their assets as long as they promised not to build any nuclear weapons. Seeing as how they weren't building any anyway, that seems like a pretty good deal for Iran. We stopped pounding you for something you didn't do. All they did was put sanctions on them until they did what they wanted, which was to give them a better deal for the United States and some kind of influence inside of Iran itself. So, the whole thing was crap. They said the same thing about Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, about nuclear weapons, and all of them were completely false. Meanwhile, the only country that really does have nuclear weapons is the DPRK, but they don't really want to touch them because they actually have them. And again, Trump went on all about how China took the jobs and how they're taking it and then laughing at us, when the whole thing is U.S. companies are exporting them to China. This is not something that China specifically did to try to screw over the U.S. and accusing them of currency manipulation without bothering to explain what currency manipulation is, because I guarantee you the vast majority of his supporters don't know what it means either. It just means China bad, China make currency bad. Essentially, China has to devalue its currency. That's the only way the country will function, and it buys U.S. debt for a reason. It buys U.S. debt because it inflates the value of the U.S. currency because it's on a market. It's not a fixed exchange rate, and that allows them to be able to be exporters. If the U.S. really didn't want to allow it to happen, then they wouldn't sell the friggin' debt to China to begin with. And that debt has to remain there because China needs that debt to be there in order for them to be able to sell to the United States. It's not some grandiose evil conspiracy, as you can tell that Trump's trying to subtly give out to his audience. You fear the Chinese, the great yellow peril, you could say. And one of the great things about Trump's complete obliviousness to how international politics works. He says, we're protecting Japan, we're protecting South Korea, we're protecting all these countries, and they don't fit the bill for their protection. And it's frankly ridiculous. These countries are occupied by the United States. The people of Okinawa voted overwhelmingly, like 95, 97%, to kick the United States out of their region. These countries are being controlled by the United States, not protected by the United States, as he's trying to claim. And then he says that how they should be paying them to protect them. What, you're gonna double down on asking people to pay for their own occupation? I mean, that's simply, it's completely ridiculous. And of course, Trump went completely over into giving out the hint that if he doesn't win in the election, it's going to be some kind of a conspiracy. The moderator perfectly said, will you accept the votes of the American people? Well, there's been a past of, a bit of manipulation of votes from the Democrats, hinting towards, what happened with Bernie Sanders. But so in answer, he never really answered. He just kind of went on and gave a really vague, non-committal answer. Well, Hillary Clinton just said, yeah, she'll accept the will of the American people. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And Hillary Clinton stayed mostly on message to forward, her ideas, which really came out as very vague, although not as vague as Donald Trump's, which really don't say anything. He just says, bring back the jobs, bring back the jobs. And then when asked how to bring back the jobs, he basically just says not to let them leave to begin with. So in a sense, he's not really saying anything. He's some words about import tariffs, like that, but he's not giving a plan to bring jobs back. I mean, he's not really saying anything, but making it sound like he's saying everything you want to hear. But Hillary Clinton mostly stayed on message, kept a cool head, got a few really good snide remarks in on him, which was actually really good. They were talking about stamina, and Trump went on stamina. He used the word stamina so many times that it was like he sounded like a goddamn Viagra commercial. But when Hillary Clinton got to talk about stamina, she talked about all the things that she'd been put through, 11 hours of being questioned by Congress, etc. Said, yeah, that's the kind of stamina I have. And I'm not conveying what she said really very well, but it was a hell of a zinger at the time. And of course, Donald Trump again lied about saying that he didn't support the Iraq War, when he certainly did. But he's going to keep saying that over and over again, because then he can't criticize the Clintons, Hillary Clinton for it, or Obama for it, if he did support himself in the beginning, which he did. And the really astounding part for me was when they got to the issue of crime and police violence. Trump advocated the stop and frisk program, which we know was a racial profiling program, and that was ruled at by a court, and it was ruled unconstitutional. And that was his idea for trying to deal with violence on the street, and particularly as it relates to officer-related shootings. So his essentially idea was to blame the public. It's essentially neither one of them really wanted that. Both of them refused to criticize the police. So Trump said, no, stop and frisk worked, when it very clearly didn't. There's easily first page of a Google search. It did not work. It was ruled unconstitutional. And the only reason he pushed it, because he and his audience know that it was minorities who were targeted by it. And this kind of racism is pretty much his base. So that's how he was able to get away with that one. But when it actually came right down to police violence, the killings of unarmed black people by the police, neither one of them would criticize the police. Hillary Clinton said, community relations, officer training, a whole bunch of other things, anything but actually blaming the police officers for the actions that they themselves take. A lack of training didn't lead a woman to shooting a guy who was unarmed. There was no lack of training. They go through a tremendous amount of training. You don't need to be trained to know not to shoot an unarmed person. Come on. It's complete BS. She just doesn't want to say anything. It's anything but the actions of the police officers. Trump, however, essentially blamed, without outright coming out and saying it, on the black communities. Well, there's a lot of violence in the black communities, and that violence has to be addressed. So police shoot an unarmed black man because there's a lot of violence in the black communities. And the solution to that is the racial profiling of stop and frisk. So in other words, Trump, in a roundabout way, is actually saying it's black people's fault that unarmed black people get shot by the cops and killed. So again, he's taking a tremendously racist position, when in the end, both of them, neither one of them wanted to actually address the police killings that have been going on. And this is my take about what the whole debate was about. I live tweeted it last night, and I hope that what I've said here gives you a little bit more of an understanding as to the way that I saw the debate going. As to who actually won, nobody. But the American people essentially lost. Trump stayed on message. Hillary Clinton stayed on message. They both took snide jabs at each other. If you really wanted to reduce it to debating skills, Hillary Clinton did win. But that's not really how presidential debates work. The debates work by how many people support which candidate. And particularly if there's a change. Right now, Hillary Clinton's ahead, they said on CNN, by about 2 percentage points. If that changes and Trump pulls ahead, then you can definitely say that Trump won the debate, even though he didn't do anything to actually out-debate Hillary Clinton. Because, again, this isn't objective science. This is politics. And politics is more about image than what you actually get done. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.